Hello and a warm welcome back to the channel of nonsense. Today's review is the 2024 Triumph Daytona 660, a bike that is known to men on the internet called Barry, who are 63, live in Rotherham, own a £22,000 GS Adventure that does 500 miles a year. They will know this as, it's not a proper Daytona. But it is. It's a sports bike for the road now. It's not a super sport bike. I've been living with it for a few weeks, and here are my reviewy thoughts on it for what they're worth. Probably not very much, but I've got a nice brown jacket. Now, if you do want one of these, you'll have to go to your local Triumph dealer and give them £8,600, which is about £700–800 more than the Trident 660, which came out a few years ago and has been a runaway sales success for Triumph. This is trying to do the same thing, but for people that want a slightly sportier edge to their bikes. It comes in this rather lovely pearlescent white, it comes in red, and it comes in black as well. And just before we get into the review, let's just talk about names, because Triumph can obviously call it whatever they want. Saying it's not a Daytona is a bit like saying a Ford Mondeo isn't it a Ford Mondeo. It bloody is. It says Mondeo on the back. I've got a car YouTube channel. I'm a car journalist by trade, if you didn't know that. Ford has done this with things like the Puma. That used to be a sporty coupe. It's now an SUV. The Cougar used to be a god-awful V6 coupe saloon thing. It's now an SUV. So Daytona, is it an SUV? Let's find out. Now, if this was going to be the bike equivalent of an SUV, it would have a 2-litre diesel engine, but it hasn't. It's got something much more exciting. And this bike is going up against things like the Suzuki GSX X8R, which I haven't ridden yet. It's got a parallel twin. Everyone seems to love that bike. This has obviously got a 3-cylinder engine, being a Triumph. It is quite far removed from the Trident 660 engine. It's got a much higher rev limit. It revs to just over 12,500 RPM now, which is a good 2,000 more than the Trident. It's up to 95 horsepower. You can still restrict it if you're on an A2 license. It's got 69 Newton meters of torque, which should be celebrated because it's got the number 69 in it. Drinks from a 14-litre fuel tank. It's got 10,000 mile service intervals as well. And believe you me, this doesn't feel like the Trident's engine. That engine doesn't rev enough. It feels a bit like my first triple. This feels a lot closer to the Street Triple's engine when you're riding it. We'll get onto that in a bit. But this, yeah, this makes this bike have, I'm gonna say it, a bit of soul. Now, I'm filming this from that sort of slightly weird OnlyFans special camera angle because I do have a bit of sympathy for the people that think this isn't a proper Daytona. Because when this bike was first launched, there were lots of photos from low on the front end, and that's when you really realise this isn't a super sport bike, because you can see the bars are almost on risers. It looks a bit, dare I say, a bit orthopedic from down there. You've got this sleek bodywork, you've got a reimagining of the classic Daytona face, but then you've got really high bars, which is a bonus when you're riding it through town and just living with it. But looks-wise, it definitely doesn't look as mean as a proper Daytona. But yeah, as I said, the name of the game is accessibility. So 810mm seat height. You can get a lower seat that drops this by a whole inch. So yeah, if you're a bit of a short ass, you're probably going to be fine on this. I think if you jump from this onto a Daytona 675, you'll basically dislocate your entire body. But this is just an all-day comfortable riding position. It's leant forward enough. Someone in the comments is going to call it happy shopper, but if that means it's a bike that is comfortable to use, I'm okay with that. It's not a heavy bike either. It's 201 kilos wet, ready to go. I think that's with a 90% full tank of fuel. It's just a nice thing. The mirrors are nice and big. They feel pretty sturdy, pretty robust, that they're not going to go anywhere. You can get some luggage for it. Triumph will say, I think, a tank bag and a tail pack. There's a quick shifter option as well, which this one doesn't have. But yeah, let's talk about the electronics, because this bike has some. Therefore, I should talk about them. I'm going to put the side stand down. The side stand does look really cheap, I should point that out. Now, from this angle, you can see that the Daytona is being built down to a price because it's got the same dashboard layout as on the Tiger Sport and the Trident. But to be honest, it works really well. It's got a fuel gauge, it's got a range readout. You've got a little mode button down here so you can switch between the 3 riding modes, which are your usual, I think, rain, road and sport. There's no track mode, which is very telling. You've got quite cheap feeling switchgear, but it does the job. You've got traction control and ABS. You can switch the traction control off, but it's not lean sensitive. Again, this bike is based on an entry-level bike. So yeah, I think the triple clamps look a little bit cheap. You've got to show a big piston forks. They're not really adjustable though. Yeah, it's okay, but it doesn't feel anything like as special as, you guessed it, Daytona 675 did. But they're doing different things, and if they built that bike now, it would have cost £1 bazillion. Oh yeah, other boring things, you can get this bike spec'd with tyre pressure monitoring, and also there's a USB port under the seat. Should we go and ride it? I think we should go and ride it, and you can all whinge about it. Yeah, let's ride it. It fires into life with a familiar triple a familiar triple kind of rumble, but it's, yeah, I love a triple engine. If you are new to biking and you haven't yet discovered a 3-cylinder engine, preferably made by Yamaha or Triumph, then you're missing out, purely because the old cliche goes that they have similar torque to a parallel twin, but a top end rush similar to an inline 4, but they don't lug like a twin, and you don't have to work it really hard to get anywhere like you do a 4-cylinder sometimes. So yeah, this engine, it's got proper poke in the mid-range. It's got really, really strong pull, and I'm not just talking like, oh, it's a, you know, 95 horsepower bike. It feels fast. It feels properly fast from like, what, 5,000 RPM in second gear, and it's got a gear indicator as well. It absolutely flies. My first bike was a 2009 Street Triple, and yeah, that engine might have had a tiny bit more capacity than this, but this feels much like that bike did. Right, let's talk about the ergos. I've mentioned them briefly. I did forget to mention, I think, when I was sitting on this and that shot up my kind of pointing at my jock strap earlier, that I'm 6'3", so I make any bike look really small. This isn't a big bike, which it fits me fine, but if you're small, I think this would work out really well, especially if you get the low seat. It's not intimidating while still looking kind of cool. If I ride anything small, I make it look stupid. So your mum's safe, but I might look a bit ridiculous on this. But anyway, the ergos are comfortable. The pegs, I think, are slightly higher and slightly further back than on the Trident, but by about 25 millimeters, which isn't a massive difference. It does feel sportier, but even with my long legs, I don't feel cramped doing decent rides on this. Just a nice relaxed position. I can keep my elbows nice and loose and do the chicken wings to relax myself. All of my weight is mostly on my bum. There's a little bit on my wrists, but really not enough that it's going to annoy you. And when Triumph did the press release for this bike, press presentation should I say, back in January 2024, they explicitly said that they're trying to split the difference between the extreme Yamaha R7, which is desperately uncomfortable, and the Kawasaki 650, which they said feels more like a sports tourer. This, they basically made it straight in the middle of those two bikes, so not too extreme, not too soft and namby-pamby. But yes, some other things I'm going to forget to say before we get to our twisty roads. The fueling is really smooth. The engine can pull like really smoothly from low revs, so if you are a new rider starting out, this is great around town. You don't really have to worry too much about what gear you're in. You're not going to be stalling it because you pulled away in second. You'll have to give it some more revs and get with the program pretty quickly, but otherwise, yeah, feels like a grown-up bike. It's got an MPG readout, got a range readout. My 16,000 pound Yamaha doesn't have a range readout. It's got a couple of trips. It's all really easy to use. I actually prefer this dash to the one on some of the fancier Triumphs, like the big LCD on the Street Triple RS. But yeah, it's going to have some fun. It's going to find some twisty roads, and we'll talk about handling and performance. How delightful. Well, let's talk about that engine a little bit while we're in the saddle. It is, as I said, quite a move on from the Trident's engine. It's got a new crankshaft, it's got new pistons, it's got new something else, I can't remember exactly what. It's a lot revier, and it's a lot freer revving as well. It's got new throttle bodies. The Trident engine makes two of a one-piece throttle body. This has got 3 individual ones. But basically what it adds up to is just an engine that still has real grunt throughout the rev range, but as we'll find out when we get to a slightly faster road in a minute, it's got a real top end, and it's actually a really free spinning engine that's a delight to rev out. And I just like that about it. And the gearbox has improved from the Trident as well. And I have to say, it's one of the smoothest gearboxes I've used in years. This bike hasn't got the optional quick shifter, but I'm essentially treating it like it has. I'm kind of doing lots of clutchless upshifts, the occasional clutchless downshift, being a bit careful of that one, but it's just a real delight to use. The clutch is nice and light as well. Nothing about this is clunky or a pain in the arse. It kind of feels polished. It feels like Triumph has had this 660 platform around for a while, and this is like a development of it. And yeah, feels just really easy to ride. But anyway, we're going to get some slightly faster roads, talk about the handling, and get to hear that engine a bit more. And then I've got to go and do some meetings. Boo. Right, we're getting to my country B-road that I used to test all my bikes on, and I'm aware that I came down here on my first ride video of this bike, but in the kind of like 50-80 miles I've done since then, my opinions of this bike have changed slightly, like not massively. The handling is the biggest area where I've kind of slightly I've realised something about this bike. It doesn't turn in that fast, and it's got a slowness to the steering that perhaps we're not used to from Triumph. Their bikes are usually pretty tippy-inny, they feel pretty good. This needs a bit more concerted effort when you're doing your counter steering, so that's where you have to drop your elbows down so nice and low, your forearms parallel to the road, but I'm back in the seat and push on the bars. It's still a nimble bike, but it's not quite as agile initially as I thought it was. And again, the next thing is the feel from the front end. I've seen some journalists whinging about this, and I get what they're saying. You don't get a huge amount of feel from the front tyre of this bike. I think that's mostly to do with the riding position, because your bum's not up and your wrists aren't down. The front end isn't really weighted much more than on the Trident, really. So when you get to a corner, you have to slightly trust it. But at normal road speeds, is it an issue? No, I don't think it is. I know MCN just did a big group test of this against its middleweights, and they placed this third. I think it was third or second. And they criticised the front end feel, and I know the guy at MCN, Carl Stevens, is a good mate. He's got a very big dog. He's very small, but he's an ex-racer, and they'll be looking at these bikes with a real granular, microscopic eye on the handling and the feedback, which I think you don't always need or want in a road bike, especially one like this, which is slightly more pitched at the bottom end of the market. But for me, I can have a lot of fun on this bike. Did we talk about the noise? Did we talk about the noise? The 3-cylinder engine's one of the best noises in motorcycling, and this has got a really good version of it. As I said, it spins really freely, so you know, you've got so many revs to play with. Like, I'm doing 40, I'm just going to stick it in first because I can. And it's not making your eyeballs bleed with the speed, but it's a pretty nippy thing, and you will find excuses to rev it out. I would say, if you're coming, you won't be, but if you are coming from a Daytona 675, this is quite a linear pull to the red line. It's not got a top end rush like that bike had. Where I remember on the Daytona 675, I think it got to about 10,000 RPM, then it slid you back in the seat. It was a proper serious race bred engine. This isn't, but it's still a good thing. It's still a good thing, and I think if you kind of reverse calculated what this bike would have cost in 2009 when the Daytona 675 came out, or 2008, this would probably be the equivalent of about £4,000 back then. So you have to bear these things in mind. Now, I've not really mentioned the brakes yet. That is because they're really good and they do the job. They're not too grabby, but they do a really good job of stopping you in a really short distance. They feel trustworthy, and that's what you want. Now, I don't know if this is specific to this particular example of the Daytona 660, but when you brake and the revs get low, you get a real notchiness coming through the bars. It almost feels like a warped disc, but it's not. I don't know what it is. It's like there you go, like about 3,000 RPM. It's not the engine trying to stall out, but it feels a bit chuntry. There's something odd going on. I don't know if it's the ABS pump or a headstock bearing or something, but yeah, it's a bit vibrating. It feels like you're braking something when you're slowing down and going through about 3,000 RPM. But anyway, I thought I'd just mention it because this is my experience as I'm seeing it. Now, I guess one of the flip sides of having that slightly slower handling is that the ride on this bike is pretty good. It's pretty compliant over crappy B roads. It's definitely been developed with British roads in mind. It's not rock hard, and for me that is a big advantage over a proper super sport bike, because I feel confident going down this admittedly 40 limit muddy crappy British road, and it's not annoying me. The seat foam is nice and padded. It's a comfortable bike that just happens to look a bit like a sports bike. So yeah, that's the upside to not having razor sharp super sportness geometry and all the rest of it. It's comfortable even with 100 kilos me on it and a bit. But anyway, it is a good bike to ride. It's not the sharpest handling thing in the shop, and the engine isn't, despite having all those revs, isn't the various 3 cylinders that have been made. But I don't think anyone was expecting that really at this price point on this platform. So yeah, I keep saying this about this bike, you have to set your expectations and then you won't be disappointed. But who is this bike for? Who is this bike not for? There's only one person who can tell us, and he's wearing a brown jacket and standing in a lay-by. Let's go to our special board correspondent now. So time to sum up my thoughts on the new Triumph Daytona 660. I'm going to talk about who I think it's for and who it's not for. Starting with who it's not for, it's not for snobs. It is built down to a price. Some of the components on it are cheap. Look at the side stand, look at the rear brake lever. They're from the Trident. They look like they've been made in the same factory as a World War II Sten gun, but you know, needs must to get the price down. No point wasting money on things that cost loads of money for no reason. It's also not for track day heroes. If you're new to biking, absolutely you could have a hoot on this on your first track day, but it's not really going to be a cheap alternative to people that want a CBR 600R, strip the fairings off, stick slicks on it and all that stuff. Although Triumph is doing a race package for this so it can compete in the BSB support series. You can tell I've just had a big lunch. It's not really a track bike, obviously. Now, who is it for? I think it's for first-time riders that don't like the look of a kind of sat up naked bike and they want something a bit sportier. I think it looks really good. I think it's also all day comfortable as well, and it would make a hell of a commuter as well because it's so narrow. When you fold those mirrors in, you can get through tiny gaps in London that you probably wouldn't get through on a Trident, to be honest. I also think it's people that just want a really good road bike that makes them feel good about their life. Ringing that engine out to 12,650 RPM without breaking the speed limit too much in second gear is one of life's greatest pleasures. Sure, the exhaust is quiet, but all modern bikes are as well. I think it's just for open-minded people that have realised they don't want something really firm and hard. Look at the Ducati Supersport 950S. That is one of my favourite road bikes. This is about £8,000 less than that bike, or just a bit less. And it's doing the same sort of job, but a bit more cheaply than the Italians can do it. So yeah, I have been impressed with it. The brakes are sharp. I've had a few quibbles with like a funny vibration on the hard braking, but other than that, the engine is good, the handling is good. It's not razor sharp. Some people have been whinging about a slightly vague front end. At road riding speeds for me, I haven't noticed it. It's got the right tyres on it. It's got good components. The money's been spent wisely. So in short, I'm waffling. Go and ride one. You might be surprised, you might be impressed. Just don't let your prejudices get in the way. Now, speaking of prejudices, I will be prejudiced against you if you don't like this video, and subscribe to the channel and go down to the comments and leave me the Thai word for it is a real Daytona. I will see you next time. I'm going on the Eurotunnel in 12 hours on my MT10 and I can't bloomin' wait. See you later. Some touring content coming soon, if I don't get rained on.